Innovation in the use of data, which is kind of the raw material of much digital services, organisational management and policy making alike. As ever, it's kind of a quick 5 minutes from each of the panel, followed by questions from me and from you. And we've got another brilliant panel. Alex Benet, Chief Information Officer of the Canadian Government. William Priest is the Chief Executive of Geospatial Commission in the UK Cabinet Office. Paul Brooke, Europe, Middle East and Africa Director for Data Analytics and AI of Dell EMC. Mart Maggie is Director General for Statistics in Estonia. And Sarah Henry, Director of Methods, Data and Research at the Office for National Statistics UK. And we will go straight to Alex.
Thank you. I have to say, going after the videos like that is quite intimidating because it was very inspiring, so thank you, EY. We could have gone in many different ways in this conversation on data. Could have talked about AI, could have talked about privacy, could have talked about values. I'm actually not going to talk about data, and since I'm talking on the stage, well, good luck sort of getting me off it here. I'm actually going to talk about business model change and how we do public sector, and an experience that's happened to me that's kind of fundamentally changed. I'll also explain why Elsa's on the screen, by the way, in a second. But how an experience that I've had personally running our national museums in the country fundamentally changed my appreciation of what happens when you actually start releasing data en masse in a real way and engaging differently. The model changes. So what we're still doing, however, with data is applying industrial age thinking in an age where it's a data-driven economy and where platforms and sharing economies exist. Governments continue to hoard information in a massive way. You're starting to see where Elsa comes in. So the story I want to tell you is actually of our national museums. We decided and made the decision, the policy decision, that all of our content should be made available to the public by default at moment of creation. So they effectively became the world's first open by default public sector institution. Within 2 hours of creation, a document was released. Some of you are still taking pictures of slides. I have no idea, please don't, it's just Elsa. Because I saw many of you this morning taking pictures of some really good slides. I do not have that. So please do take the pictures though. But so anyways, the point of the exercise was to actually do government differently. So imagine you're collecting an artifact, you have a strategic report that you're preparing, you have an RFP that you're preparing, all information live in the public within 2 hours of creation. Massive culture change, right? So a historian, what if I write something stupid? Well, then don't write something stupid because it will be live. And as a public servant, you have a certain degree of professionalism. But if you get corrected in your historical assessment of a situation, would that not be cultural democracy? And would you not actually get free consulting out of it from all historians across the world and across the country? We had pushback from our librarians because they did not want us to release the 3D images of planes or other things because they sold those images for a profit. And then when I asked them how much they were making, they said about $14,000 a year. So as the CEO of that organization, I wrote them a check for $14,000. And then we started releasing things en masse, and amazing things started to happen because we wanted to do video games, right? And as a bunch of historians, we don't know how to do mobile games. It would have been a disaster. And it was also very expensive. It was about $500,000 a game to produce. We got contacted by a small company out of Toronto that actually had 3 people, so talking about this morning procurement and sort of SME diversification, and they offered to get into an agreement with us, and the game started costing about $80,000 a year. They were using data that we had made available, all 3D scanned aircrafts from the World War I that we had in our collection that we just made available because I paid the librarians to make it available, and actually started producing new revenues for us as a Crown Corporation. And the video game started being dispersed in 180 countries within a week, every single time. Right? And so now we're getting Canadian heritage out into the hands of other countries. It turns out that Nintendo actually called that institution and started doing video games on a Nintendo platform. As this tiny little Canadian museum that most of you will never know about or never come to, we were actually now on the global stage for a fraction of the cost. We also wanted to do documentaries. Because, we have a complex with our neighbors to the south and how big and amazing their museums are, and everybody knows the Smithsonian. Nobody knows how many museums are in the Smithsonian, but they know who the Smithsonian is because of the television channel and its social media and other things. So we wanted to do movies. It turns out it's about $1 million a pop to do a 4K documentary. We're not documentary experts, we're historians. But we got contacted by a company in Ottawa that does 4K documentaries and helped produce The March of the Penguins. So like they're no pushover, and said, hey, we saw all the data that you've been putting out, because we had 60, 70, 80,000 documents out there, and we want to do a documentary, and it turns out that your cost will actually be $90,000 because 95% of your documentary is funded by federal government grants. So we weren't even able to help ourselves until we released the data. So the entire model changed of government. It was joint democracy, joint heritage building, no longer sort of a white man telling you what your history is in a museum in Canada. It was democratizing all of that cultural heritage. It was cheaper to run a public sector institution by creating a service ecosystem and new channels. It forced our public servants to work extremely differently, but it turns out that it's more fun because people value your work more. So the entire model changed. So I'm asking you, if you're working in the public sector, in the heritage space or the science space, why would you not be an open by default institution and put all of this data out there at moment of creation? Never mind harvesting or any of those things. Please put it out. So 2 slides and then I'm done. So amazing, amazing opportunity to be in the public sector in a digital age. So the first thing you got to do, back to Elsa, let go of the data. It does not belong to you. It belongs to civil servants. You should be working outside the firewall. At least 50, 60, 70% of our content should be outside a firewall where the public can see it. And the next one is, and I apologize for copyright, this is Nike, the other one was Disney. I should be okay with that. But you actually get into a point where you just have to do the thing and then move and adjust as you're going through it. And I often encourage you to do that, because all of the issues that we cause or think that we're causing ourselves around privacy or other things, they actually end up being just okay and working out just fine as long as you do the thing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And we have Alex with us for the next hour, but there is a recent interview with him on globalgovernmentforum.com, if you want a bit more background on that, amongst other things. William.
Sure, thanks very much, Matt. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to move around a little bit, so bear with me. This is the geospatial moment in the UK. I don't know if you realise, but 80% of all data sets have a geospatial element. Geospatial relates to location and place, and increasingly the innovation that's taking place in the data world is linking place, location with people and time. And this is really important in terms of driving smarter government and a smarter nation, which I'm going to spend a little time talking about. But secondly, we are a manifesto commitment. So in the 2017 UK general election, the commitment was made to open up more data in general and continue to open up geospatial data sets, and to realize economic value from the interoperability of data and make it more effective and more available to the private sector and the public sector. So as we heard this morning, often policy creation is separated from implementation. I'm in a fairly innovative and unique position where I've got both policy and strategy and implementation. And more so, which is very unique, I've got Treasury money. I've got £80 million from HM Treasury to put into practice the changes that we need to make the data more open, available, and take away some of the friction within the data sets. Great position to be in. I also have within my team strategic oversight for a number of what we call partner bodies. These are the bodies that UK government funds or part funds in terms of the production of the geospatial data information. We have world leaders here in the UK in terms of the National Mapping Agency, Ordnance Survey, Land Registry, who registers all of our assets in the UK, through to subterranean geospatial information and data from the Coal Authority, the Geological Survey, and also our maritime agency, which acts on the World Platform to provide marine charts. So we are building a coherent strategy across this production group. Equally, we have 3 goals. I mentioned economic value add, and the next slide shows the goal there. But why are we doing this? Why are we making the data more open and more interoperable? Firstly, we want to derive and drive economic value add in the private sector. Secondly, which is the theme of this conference, we want to drive public service more effectively. So geospatial underpins better housing, better infrastructure and construction, better mobility, better transportation, better farming, better agriculture. The list goes on. So that's our second goal. The third goal of the Commission is to drive environmental value add. So understanding better and contributing better to the environmental goals that the UK has as part of the wider United Nations commitments. And this slide just touches on what we're doing so far. We launched the call for evidence last year. We're gathering insights from both the private and the public sector, and that will inform our annual plan and our strategy that we'll publish later this year. We're also looking at innovation in its own right. We've also launched a future technology review through an organisation here called Public. We'd welcome thoughts from around the globe on where future technology is going. I will be investing some money in innovation, incubating new startups perhaps, creating new space for innovation and geovation. And Ordnance Survey have a great geovation hub here in London already, and we're looking to replicate that kind of model around the UK. Here are some of the goals and some of the focus areas. 6 to 11 billion. I report to John Manzoni, who was here earlier. Where's my 11 billion? John asks me every week. Now, it's going to take time. This won't happen next week, next month, next year. But my implementation team has already set out a roadmap to realize around about 6 billion value add over an 8 to 10 year period through those vertical markets. So we're working very closely with the private sector. This is a message that was made this morning as well. I spent some really great time with the insurance sector, for example. They have thousands of data analysts, thousands of geospatial people looking at geospatial data sets to better inform how they support consumers and businesses with insurance premiums. That's around flood protection, hazard prediction and prevention. Telco, which is my background, we're working closely with the 5G community to enable the linkage of technology platforms with geospatial data information to drive IoT, smarter vehicles, and so on. So we're working with a number of core vertical markets. This is just a real-life innovation project that we're about to communicate more widely, a crowdsourcing project where we're investing 1.5 million through Innovate UK to help us run a competition. We've had 66 expressions of interest, and we expect to launch maybe 6 to 8 projects, getting the public involved with creating and helping us with geospatial data. So, just lastly, just to signpost where we're going as the Geospatial Commission, an annual plan this spring, a 5-year UK geospatial strategy for the first time ever, hopefully later this year in the autumn. And as I said, that will be underpinned by the feedback from the Future Technology Review that we've just launched. You can get hold of us. You can get hold of me at these, follow these links. Love to hear from you and look forward to your questions. Thanks very much.
And there is also an interview with William on globalgovernmentforum.com, again, for further background. Come here from Paul, Dell EMC's European, Middle East and Africa Director for Analytics and AI.
Thank you very much, and hello everyone. I don't actually talk to a lot of people in UK government. You can probably tell by the accent. I am a UK, I think of the right word, subject. Any constitutional people here? I'm a subject. Citizen? I don't know. What is an absolute joy is to hear the word innovation so often, and then see absolute examples of this happening. It's really easy in a role like mine to kind of drift over to some hotbed of innovation in their own mind, the Berlins of this world, California of this world. And you meet a lot of entrepreneurs who are doing some very impressive things. I'm now reminded by my own founder and chief exec, that's Michael Dell. That's Michael to you, to me, it's Mr. Dell. Hey, I don't make the rules. I'm reminded that we're all entrepreneurs now. We have to be entrepreneurs, because the world is moving at such a tremendous pace. It's really interesting. Also, the previous presentation talked about the geospatial, and it's really interesting. People, places, things, and time are going to be significant elements of the next industrial revolution, and how we index them and use them and bring them in as data points to provide a service to our citizens, our subjects, our customers, whatever you want to call them, is going to need a significant amount of technology and still importantly in a world where artificial intelligence or automated innovation, see what I did there? Automated innovation, using robot code, using whatever you need to do to make the service more consumable, becomes critical. Entrepreneurs do this naturally. Young folks tend to think they're seeing something that has never been seen before, and we see a presentation that has lots of information on it, and then students of history will go back and say, I am pretty sure William the Conqueror commissioned a study that would survey the whole of the kingdom that he had just conquered with his army. History tells us that was so he could then find out a taxable value on the kingdom. Now delivering a doomsday book for the United Kingdom, can you think of the level of granularity we'd be able to go to? And I love the subsurface stuff as well. You think of the land of Britain and then the coal thing. Everything's still under there. I believe that belongs to the Crown. Or is that just riverbeds? It's difficult here when you're kind of the sponsor, and I get the knowledge partner, and we thank you for that. I don't want to turn this into an advert. And I'm not going to use the but word now. We've put up as our slide here, this is the company's mission. And when your founder is still very much running the business, the family of businesses that make up Dell Technologies, you'll be familiar with the Dell brand maybe on the PC devices that we do. You may not see the millions of devices that are embedded in trucks, in boats. Hey, we embed devices in boiler rooms so that we can reduce the cost of servicing boiler rooms in public buildings. That is an Internet of Things happening right now. Those same PCs are embedded in cars, but they're also embedded in refrigerators, so a low-cost German retailer can reduce the cost of providing frozen food of high quality at value to their customers. And that's about saving money. The innovative piece that comes with that is about making opportunities. And there's plenty of examples from the Bay Area, from Berlin, from Paris, and right here in London about people using digital innovation to make money and drive commercial opportunity. I would urge everyone in public sector as a taxpayer, and having seen some of the things that are happening with tax, I agree. I would love my bank to say, this individual is PAYE. I don't ever want to talk to the tax office. Pay as you earn, you being me. I love that model. I love the Estonian model. I think it's really cool. Other people may want a different way. And what we're doing when we're driving human progress is leaving humans with choice. Because choice, I believe, will be at the center of the next industrial revolution. That will, of course, be digital. So to help you guys, and I mean you guys, you folks, everyone who's ever looked at our business, everyone who wants to be a customer, doesn't want to be a customer, is just broadly interested. We did a survey of some of our customers, big, and we're very privileged. Some of our customers are still in very much the small business startup phase. Some of those customers will be looking at the tax office to see how they can gain advantage from the statistic that the tax office can be bringing them. I love that. We support the entrepreneurs who have helped us build this plan. It's our 2030 vision. Too close to 2020 now. That used to be the big thing, didn't it? 2020 vision. No. We're 2030 now. Please download it. Please use it. Please enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you for listening to Dell Technologies.
Thank you, Paul. Mart, Director General of Statistics for Estonia.
Estonia began developing its digital society more than 2 decades ago and is now a leading digital nation. Digitalization was a strategic choice for Estonia to improve the competitiveness of the state and increase the well-being of its people. The efficiency of the digital society is most clearly evident in the working time saved on bureaucracy, document handling and data collecting. Data is stored at the point of collection and accessible to authorized organizations in real time. Therefore, the e-cabinet can make the highest level decisions at speed and based on reliable information. Each citizen may also monitor access to one's data and make knowledge-based decisions on important matters. Estonian Data Agency works in close cooperation with other institutions to provide reliable and objective data, mostly collected from registers and databases. It also implements machine-readable data collection to save time and publish information faster. We aim to make Estonia a better place based on data.
Hi. Is Estonia hype? It's a question, I think. Because we talk so much about digitalization in Estonia. And may I reveal the truth? I mean, there is two things. Estonia is based on a pure luck, and also on non-existing legacy, what we had. So what we did, we really started our operations years ago, and that was a simple road. I mean, with the digital IT, with the interoperability with the X road, and also with the new technology. This has been a rapid success. The question for us has been now, for a recent years, what and could be the next steps? What is the e-state 2.0? And I think we all in Estonia now, we recognize that the e-state 2.0 is just based on the data. And that's a knowledge-based state, what we're building now. We also find that the center point of this e-state 2.0 is the citizen. So what we do is, based on the data science, we're really trying to identify which are the specific needs in the society and clearly address them. The data both enables us to do the great success analysis, but also based on the AI, provide excellent service. Let me show just two examples. We made life for the entrepreneurs a bit easier in Estonia. On this green map, based on the big data, the electricity data and mobile data on back of it, so we can identify easily where the people live, where they work, also what are their average incomes, and not less. I mean, we can add also on the top of those, what are their businesses, in which creed, what businesses are founded. So it's easy to build up a new store or establish new gym. Due to our work with the EU databases, that's a work what we did about the looking on the difference or the changes on the labor market in EU, and trying to understand how the automatization works and how it impacts to the different workplaces. We created for the citizens a simple tool, a career path. So you can easily follow on a web how and what competencies and skills is needed if you want to take a career path for you. It's hard work with the data, and there is 3 prerequisites for our understanding to work with data. The first is there should be a willingness in a state to work as invisible state. So the data should be collected only once, but used as much as possible for the scientific and statistical purposes. That brings value for every citizen. The second prerequisite is absolutely the privacy by design. On the times when we are living, it's starting from the GDPR, but ending with the cybersecurity. We should address all the privacy, different aspects, both the personal privacy, but also confidentiality of the data. And the last but not least is the digital leadership. It's also absolutely important to get the things done. To do those and working with the data in the public sector, we need the skills. And nowadays, we call them 5G level skills. So we need how to get the data, how to guard and analyze the data, how to visualize and tell the stories from the data. It is important that in a state, it's also a good, solid base is grounded for those. Canada is extremely nice example with the data strategy, which addresses the common standards, the data quality, the data stewardships. And that's not only on a state level. I think the data stewardship should be established on every organizational level. So that's an important part to get from the data the relevant information. That's my short story. Thank you, and I'm waiting for your questions.
And Sarah Henry, Director of Methods, Data and Research for the ONS.
Let's take this. Afternoon, everybody. So, as I was introduced, I'm from the Office for National Statistics, and we have a unique challenge in, well, not so unique, it's an Anglo-Saxon challenge. We don't have ID cards. So I look at envy in lots of presentations, especially from European colleagues, where I can see that you've got a structured variable that you can link data on. We don't have that. So in our case, we need to try and link data using the only variables possible, which are your name and your address. None of those are really structured. There's lots of different ways of writing names. Anyway, that's a very big problem of ours, and I'm happy to talk about that. We are the biggest agency that produces official and national statistics in the UK. Statistics are something that people often forget contribute importantly to the stability of an economy and a society. If people don't trust the statistics that are used and often don't trust government, it's a recipe for disaster. And we believe that if our statistics are reliable and credible and frequent enough, people can use them to make good decisions, whether they're investment decisions, whether they are decisions in developing public services, whatever they are. The credibility of those statistics is absolutely important in underpinning that stable society. That said, a lot of our statistics nowadays are produced from surveys. We have loads of surveys. If you're a business, we send quite a few surveys to you, and it's compulsory for you to send them back to us. If you're a resident in the UK, we sample you and collect a lot of data that way. There's an inherent problem with that. People are losing interest, losing time. It's hard to collect that data. It's also quite expensive. So our strategy is to try and use a lot more of the transactional data that is generated from people using public services. Most of our public services nowadays are digital. If you go on the gov.uk website, you'll see that there's digital ways of paying tax and digital ways of getting a passport and registering for school and all the other services that you need. That creates a lot of data, and our strategy is to bring that data together and use it to produce the statistics we produce now, but also to produce a lot more interesting statistics, because once you link data, you can start talking about how one part of society impacts on another part of society and understand that interaction between society and economy much better. But as I said, we have this problem not having an ID number, which means that we have to develop a lot of statistical methods, probabilistic methods of linking data together so that it doesn't look like the population of the UK is probably double what it really is. An integral part of that is matching back to the census, and our next census is going to be in 2021. It's going to be a mostly online census, so digital is coming into there now. We're working very hard to make sure that we're not excluding anybody that can't participate in a digital way. But then the exam question afterwards is, does that really need to be the way you run a census? Or can we use the admin data that's produced in government to do the job that a census does at this day and age? And that question at the moment is unanswered. We've got a big research program that underpins that. I'm giving you a few links here. One important one is our strategy that tells you about what I've just told you about in more detail. But we've also got a link to the work that we've done on transparency and explaining what we're doing on security to give people the confidence that the data that we're holding, which is going to be much greater than it was before, is managed well, managed responsibly, and privacy is treated with the utmost respect. That means that most of the analysis that we do is on de-identified data. The identifiable data is only used for linking purposes and then ignored, because obviously we're not interested in individuals as the Office for National Statistics. We're interested in the aggregation of the information about our population so that people can plan better services. I've also given you a link to our admin data work, which is linked to the story about our census and how we hope to replace it, and also to our data science campus, where we're doing some very innovative work to help describe the economy and the society even better by using things like street view to see where people live near green spaces, seeing if we can use shipping data, for example, to have better measures of GDP and so on and so on. Lots of interesting stuff on that. Thank you.
Lovely. We'll come to the audience for questions in just a second. Again, I'm going to use Chair's prerogative to get one in. It seems like often we can only realise the full potential of digital services where we're able to combine different data sets, often held by public bodies or even sets held by public bodies with other data externally. Obviously, there are, in different countries, different legislative or cultural or structural obstacles to that. To what extent do you think countries' ability to innovate around the use of data is going to depend on their ability to exchange data between public bodies? Actually, can I go to Mark first? Because you have the system which enables you to do this. You've got the X-Road, you've got a national ID system. You're well placed.
Yes, thank you. We're really extensively using already the kind of once, or we basically have been applied the once only principle in a state. And that's both in a law, but also in a practical terms. So there is a linkage with the X-Road from one register to another. And it is important to always understand that, yes, I mean, in which purpose the data is used, but it's also important for the citizen to understand for where and how the data is used. So if it's available for the citizen, so the citizen knows and get the access to the information where the data is used, they are more reluctant to also share the data with the public institutions.
Yeah, and you allow people complete control and visibility, don't you, over who has access to their data and permission to grant it. Canada, you don't have a national ID system and you've got a federal system. How far do you think countries' development progress is going to depend on the ability to connect those data sets?
I think it's crucial. We're not Estonia. We have 13 provinces and territories. Our healthcare and our education is delivered there. They have their own political parties. They have their own privacy commissioners. Like, it is an interesting case. So the easy answer would be, oh, we can't do what Estonia did. And it's actually the opposite. It's even more reason why we have to do some of the things that Estonia's done. So our service strategy for us is actually a federated one, which matches sort of our governance structure. Any service on any platform, on any device, with any partner, for any citizen, anywhere, which means that we have to start moving, and I apologize for technical terms, but more API sort of based service ecosystems, more release of data, and more sharing of data across the jurisdiction. So we do have legislative impediments. We did a legislative review of 11 service departments and found that we had 187 things that needed to change just to share data within the federal ecosystem. So, and in a lot of our laws, we have the word fax in our laws. I have no idea which human being thought that the fax machine was the pinnacle of technological evolution as a species, but here we are. We must collect data using fax in a lot of cases. So we know there's some of those things that change, but I think the last thing I'd say is countries like Estonia, Denmark, the smaller countries, we use them as an excuse as a larger country why we're not that size, but the reality is it's whoever changes their governance the fastest is leveraging data and technology the best to serve citizens. So there's a lot of lessons learned there for us.
Sarah, is it a matter of working our way around the obstacles, or do you have to challenge them?
Look, undoubtedly, if you want to tackle the toughest problems in society, you need to bring data together. And in some countries it's going to be easier, in other countries it's going to be more difficult, and we have to put effort in different places to make that data link. And I think that as we do that, though, we should also remember that there's a lot of issues in society that we don't collect data on, and then it's very difficult to solve them because the reality is that if you're not counted, you almost don't count because the statistics don't say anything about you. So I think it's a couple of years ago now. When was Grenfell Tower? A couple of years ago now. We had an awful tragedy in London where a big apartment building burnt down. People were living there that nobody knew about. It's tragic, and it's because the data doesn't exist. There's almost nothing to link to know that they were there. I mean, I hope everybody here is enjoying visiting London. You can see that we have a rough sleeping and homelessness problem. Again, you know, what do we know about these people so that we can help them better to link that data together? Without linkage, it's impossible to improve people's lives.
William, you're producing data in kind of 6 different centres, and there's an infinite number of centres across government that could use that data. How easy is it to share it?
Great question. I was struck by Estonia's privacy by design principle. I think that's really interesting. You know, we have a conundrum generally, I think, between privacy and openness. And there's a feeling in many areas of central and local government that it should be open by default. So we have open by default versus privacy by design. That's sort of mutually exclusive to some degree. I mentioned our 6 to 11 billion economic goals. We found 21 principles that would support releasing that value, and only one relates to more open data, which I find quite interesting, and we've analysed this. So we have 20 principles that reflect more about what the question refers to, which is better interoperability, better availability, and better awareness of the data sets. And as I go around all of our government departments, they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what data sets we've got and what they could use. So actually a big job, I think, of leveraging the data that we have is around awareness raising, harnessed with ensuring the highest levels of quality of data. So what we're building in the Commission is a sort of diamond strategy: interoperability, quality, availability, and awareness. And we will continue to look at the openness of different data sets, but that's not, I don't think, the holy grail. It's more about, you know, just the sharing. And I visited Singapore and the States in the last few months, and, you know, the other models that are emerging is a sort of a portal of portals or a hub of hubs, where you don't have to smash all the data sets together necessarily. You can keep them in the different sort of silos and hubs or portals. But it's ensuring that the portals talk together and can be reflected back out, as you mentioned, APIs, to the end users. So again, we're trying to work back from the end user community, some of those vertical markets, and understand how do they want the data presented to them. That's all that matters, not kind of where it sits or who owns it or any of that. That's a long answer. There's no single simple answer to it, but I think the privacy versus open is a really good question.
It's the axis. Paul, you have a perspective. I mean, your patch covers three continents or parts of 3 continents. Do you observe a difference in pace linked to those countries' ability to exchange data across the sector.
Absolutely no doubt in the commercial world, you can see a simple correlation. Those that are sharing and moving data effectively are making more profit. More profit maybe because they're doing lower cost, maybe they're just growing a business. We've seen this with the blitz scalers. We're massive advocates to a project called Data Capital, which is driven by a little factoid here. We store about 50% of the world's corporate data, so we know a bit about that. And a few years ago, it was all put everything in a lake and then go fishing. That portal of portals, that federation, means in the real world, where you can't put everything in a bucket and carry it around. It just doesn't work that way. Some stuff, and I love the frozen thing, you've got to let it go. Some you have, but others the privacy matter. And you have to know what it is that you cannot count or instrument. And what you get is a portal of portals. You get a lake of lakes. It is about then taking the data through APIs, through quality control, and making supported, informed decisions.
Thank you. And if we've got any questions from the floor? Son over here.
Hi, my name's Stephanie and I'm a data scientist working in HMRC. Innovation is often associated inherently with risk. How do you communicate the kind of security when you are dealing with people who justifiably are potentially risk averse about the data they hold and store?
I should go first for this one. Alex?
Sure. I think the more radical you are in your transparency and your openness as public servants, the better your dialogue will be with those skeptics. Because it forces you to act differently, right? So for example, when we did open by default at the heritage institutions I was talking about, we didn't see privacy and open by default as competing factors at all. We just brought the privacy commissioner in the tent right out of the gate, brought in some citizens right out of the gate, structured things in our work and our data flows and kind of soft automation in a way that protected privacy yet dramatically increased transparency. And we've semi-nudged our staff to go talk about it publicly. Right? Get out there and talk about the work that you're doing, because for all we know, maybe we're wrong and we'll course correct in the process. So it's not easy working in the open like this as a public servant. It is harder. It's not easy. But I think that the more radical your transparency is as a public sector institution, and you need a lot of cover. You need political cover for this. You need senior management cover in the public service. But I think it creates a very different relationship. So for example, for us with our pay system, which is a big debacle, just Google Phoenix and pay in Ottawa, and you could read for 10 months. But actually all of our documents are public by default. Which means that nobody can game anything, which was a very different relationship with vendors all of a sudden. But you need to take that step, and then you manage the risk as you have the conversation. It's actually more fun, to be honest with you. It feels like you're contributing more.
It's a very good question. I've had 30 years in the private sector and just 3 years in central government. Risk is risk, and I think the principles of risk management are the same, be it public or private sector. The sources of capital are slightly different. Obviously, we're dealing with taxpayers' money rather than shareholder, bank money or private equity money in the private sector. But the risks are the same, and the principles should be the same. I actually think, and we heard it this morning, Paul Maltby is a close colleague in MHCLG and Matthew at IPA. Matthew talked about deliverability, and that is ultimately what we should be focused on. Can we deliver A, B, or C? And then you work back from the control systems that underpin the deliverability. But just 3 years in central government, I actually think the risk appetite is pretty high in UK central government. And the approach certainly we're taking, and I've seen other departments take, which de-risks a particular implementation project, are proof of concepts. And I think that is the right way to drive innovation and change. And I think when I was working for, I'll name names, IBM, for example, in the private sector, and we were looking at central government spending 10-20 billion on major NHS projects without doing proof of concepts, and then they fail. That is, am I being quoted? That is not a good way to spend taxpayers' money. So I think risk appetites are getting higher, but the controls are also improving in terms of the way we're executing within central government.
Thank you. Paul?
A brilliant question. I agree with absolutely everything. I think that the risk...
Please disagree.
I will, don't worry. I think the risk appetites are changing. There will be a lot of talk about baking in risk, and I think risk is a word we need to understand more before we start to talk about baking in risk. You're talking about risk, I may be thinking, oh, the greatest risk is a foreign government hacking into the system and stealing the data. You may be sitting saying, no, it's the minister getting an embarrassing question. Which is the most important risk? Well, actually, that depends on your point of view. In the commercial world, risk is often easy to trim down. And it can be very easily simplified. And then you often get mistakes because it's oversimplified. So I would push in, having done multiple products in this ridiculous, crazy technology world life, understand what you mean by risk and then just deal with it.
Yes, thank you. I got quite many thoughts in my mind, I will say. Because from one hand, I want to always answer like a National Statistical Office. But on the other hand, I mean, looking on a broader picture, I think that is, for me, there is three words. One is a trust, the other is a transparency, and the last one is ethics. I think it is hard sometimes to tell which data should be available publicly, which is not. And I think there is no specific rule because it changes over the time. And I think it's important to address that there should be a kind of discussion always, a transparent discussion in a society. Which data to which use is necessary. And also what is the concrete benefit for the citizen. Because, I mean, if you have been using Waze, for example, I don't know how many have been using Waze and how many have put his or her real name in a Waze. But I mean, basically, if you trust that it's beneficial for everyone else and also your friends, I mean, where you're driving and what's going to happen with you, I mean, the roads are blocked or not. So it's basically, the trust is initial on those ones. So as much you trust the system or the society, the more you're kind of ready to share also with the society. It's not a direct answer to this question, but that's what my mind was wandering around here. Just thank you.
Thanks. Great question, of course. So I think it's really important to tell the stories about how data is used for public good, because when you say risk, it's one-dimensional, when actually what we're talking here is about the balance of risk of a breach, for example, or somebody's accidentally somebody's privacy being breached versus not doing the right things for society and the economy. That weighing of the risk is not part of your question if you take it as in a very simplistic way. So if we tell the story that describes that balance better, I think we'll get a much better public debate about it. Again, in a previous life, I participated in a very interesting thought experiment with a sample of people where this was a little bit after care.data, which was a bit of a car crash in the UK around sharing health data for research purposes. But the question that was put to the people participating in this experiment was, would you opt out from your data being used for research? And a lot of people absolutely did. But then when the second question was asked, where they said, well, okay, we'll then use the same list to deny you the services that are derived from this research. Do you still want to take your name off the list? And the numbers came down radically to almost nil. And you're from HMRC. HMRC collects tax in the UK. it's a bit like tax. Nobody wants to pay tax, but everybody wants everybody else to pay tax. It's the same with sharing data. So I think the strength of the story, and also really acting swiftly and publicly when breaches happen to give that story as well are both very important.
It's a ridiculously complex and sort of paradoxical topic in some ways, because sometimes the things we do to minimize risk create risk. I mean, Alex has just observed this with the Phoenix. We had a similar thing sometimes, some points around universal credit, where you say, well, I'm trying to minimize this risk, let's nail down exactly what this looks like, what it's going to cost, the timescales, and you create such rigidity in the program. People are not willing to speak out when things are going wrong, and then you've got things going wrong underneath, and the thing falls over. And it's brave. You need to be brave to move to a system where you're saying, actually, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, how long it's going to take, what it's going to cost. Actually, there's less risk in there. And the other thing I was thinking about, interviewing Heikki Lut, who's the former head of the Estonian civil service. How did you build this ID system in the first place? I mean, it's 10 years old or a bit older than that. And he said, well, he gave credit to the Prime Minister, who took a punt building this system when he had no application for it. He didn't know what it was going to do. That's quite a brave political risk to take, but actually it's enough paid off. So it's a complex old topic, and it's not straightforward, is it? Any more hands? We've got 7 minutes. That's time for a... I can see. Where? This man, he's enthusiastic.
Thank you. It's Mike Sterno from the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the optimal or even the acceptable level of data that the government should possess? Because I'm sure you all know, for example, in China, the government has huge amount of data about their citizens, and they even assign a social score to some of them. Thank you.
So we don't expect a quantitative answer, I suppose an answer in principle. How much data should your government hold of you, and does it depend on the kind of government? I'm going to go to start at the other end this time for me.
Okay, so I think government should hold the data it needs to deliver services, and that includes analysing that data to improve those services. It includes planning for them, it includes budgeting for them, it includes changing them when they need changing. That analysis is done on aggregate and doesn't relate to personal information about people. That should only be used for the actual delivery of the service. I think the amount of it is going to grow inevitably, and that's a good thing, because within that is the inherent longitudinal element, so that you can see what's changing, what's getting better, making sure that you're providing the services that are actually needed, not what was needed 10 years ago. So volume-wise, I really would want to see it increase, but using it responsibly and making sure that you're not tripping citizens up later on is absolutely critical. Otherwise, the whole thing will fall apart.
Yeah, I'm just, my personal opinion is yes, the data by the state should be collected only for the specific purposes. It's nothing else. Saying this one, there is also that the state in position should also help to do everything for the citizen. That means that we need to understand what the phenomena are in a society. For example, poverty or health, or what are the crucial things which affect to those. And now, coming to those ones, there may be a kind of intention or willingness to collect more data. And that's where I think it should be a collaboration with the citizens and also with the private sector in general, and with the companies, particularly. I think we are also in Estonia, we have discussions with the mobile operators, we have the discussions with the banks, and it's also showing them what does it mean for the society, and also for the end user, the citizen itself, if we use this data for particular purpose. But otherwise, as we mentioned, once only principle should always apply. Thank you.
It's a seriously good question, and philosophically there is no really good answer. Because of your medical records example, if you're not involved in research with your data, then you're not going to benefit from the research. Would you really want to live in a country with that sort of government? Now, I'm not saying that was the exact binary point. It's real easy for the commercial space to go collect everything and then, like the Prime Minister, figure out what to do with it later. So, as a government, should you collect everything and then figure out what to do with it later? That's almost impractical, and I'll tell you that as the world's largest storage provider. It's almost impossible to collect everything. And then to try to figure out what to do with it. Do you understand how much data you're talking about? Well, you guys do, and you guys do. The net of it, however, is, again, I like the Estonia model. There's a lot of data out there that doesn't belong to the government, but maybe the government can take use of it. And maybe that means using taxpayers' dollars to get access to that money. The key shouldn't be how much is enough, it's what do we need to make things better? What do we need to improve humans' lot? What do we need to get people off-grid, on-grid? Make people live longer, happier, better lives? That's a better question than how much data.
Yeah, and just building on that, other follow-on questions are, where is the data stored?
Yeah.
How safely is the data stored? Are we thinking about cybersecurity and the dangers from hacking as sort of owners of data or producers of data? Again, our Treasury's just done a study and report on the value of data in the UK. Not that we're going to sell the data on, but there's inherent value in the data, so that we are thinking about how do we leverage that, how do we share that. As I said earlier, how do we make it more interoperable? I think I would flip the question round. How easy do we feel about the data that Facebook hold and Google? I suspect we don't know how much data they're holding on us if we're on Facebook and what they're doing with it. So I think there are broader questions in terms of citizen data held by governments as well as private bodies that we're all interacting with on social media.
Thank you. Alex.
I'll just riff off of that last time. Really what you're asking is a national values question. And the citizens that we serve. And countries will vary in that approach. If I could twist your question around a little bit as well, we're really bad panelists, by the way, but to twist your poor question around, but in that conversation around national values and data collection, if you're not China or the United States, you should be worried right now. And the reason I say that, and I do mean this respectfully, but if China wants to produce 5,000 data scientists a year when there's only about 20,000 real ones in the world, they can do that. They have scale. If you're in the United States, you get lobbied to the tunes of billions of dollars every year by their industry and their big tech giants to not regulate this space so that they can choose who gets hit by the autonomous vehicle with the data that governments collected or others, and not necessarily government. So if you're Canada, the UK, Estonia, and a bunch of other countries, you're in a really interesting national values discussion, because who are you to automate national values, right? And we do not have the scale and the industrial might in some of our countries, like some of the examples I've just given. So I think it's a great question. To your point, it's not just government collection. It's not just private sector collection either. It's what we're going to do with it. And it directly relates back to sort of any kind of charter that you'll have in your country that's related to your values or your legal framework. It's going to be a very interesting 5 to 10 year period, I suspect.
Excellent.